Hello everyone. Hope everybody of you is fine and doing well. This is Dr. Manisha Bora and today I am coming with a new session on elasticity of demand. This session is in continuation with the previous session on elasticity of demand, where I have covered up to price elasticity of demand. I do hope that you people have already gone through my previous session where I have covered up to price elasticity of demand, and today I am going to cover the later portion or the remaining part of the same lecture, that is elasticity of demand, where I am going to cover the different degrees of price elasticity of demand. So proceeding with the remaining portion of the price elasticity of demand. So by now I think all of you are aware about the elasticity of demand, and also you all know what is price elasticity of demand. Just to recall what we have learned in the previous session on elasticity of demand, more precisely the price elasticity of demand. Price elasticity of demand is nothing but this is a measure of responsiveness of quantity demanded, or rather changes in quantity demanded of a commodity in response to the changes in the price of that particular commodity. So regarding the mathematical formulations, we have already studied in the previous session. So in this session we are going to study what are the different degrees of price elasticity of demand. So let's moving on. So what are the degrees of price elasticity of demand? So by degrees we mean the magnitude or the extent by which the quantity demanded of a commodity changes in response to changes in price of that particular commodity. So there would be different degrees depending upon the value of elasticity. And now based on that magnitude of elasticity of demand, the price elasticity of demand can be categorized into 5 degrees. Number 1, perfectly elastic demand. Number 2, perfectly inelastic demand. Number 3, relatively elastic demand, or simply elastic demand we can call. Number 4, relatively inelastic or simply inelastic demand. And lastly, number 5, unitary elastic demand. So these are different degrees or categorization of price elasticity of demand, and for each degree the value of elasticity is different, and the details of these degrees of price elasticity of demand will be discussing in the next slides one by one. So now if we talk about the elasticity values corresponding to each degree of price elasticity of demand, so you can see in the table that these elasticity values in absolute terms, these can range from 0 to infinity, and each with definite interpretations. So for the value of elasticity 0, it will have perfectly inelastic demand. So in the situation if the value of elasticity is less than 1, then the demand will be inelastic. Price elasticity of demand, it will be inelastic. For the elasticity value equal to 1, we will have unitary elastic demand. And again, if the elasticity value is greater than 1, the demand would be elastic or relatively elastic. And for elasticity value equal to infinity, we would have perfectly elastic demand. So these are the interpretation on the based on the elasticity value of demand, price elasticity value of demand more precisely. So in the next slides, one by one we will discuss what are the different degrees of price elasticity of demand. So the first one is perfectly inelastic demand. As the word suggests, perfectly inelastic. That means the responsiveness of the demand of the commodity is either less or negligible or totally absent with respect to the price of that commodity. In other words, change in price of a particular commodity leaves the demand of that commodity unaffected. Although normally we can see that whenever there is a price changes, the demand for that commodity also changes. However, in this case, the change in the price of a commodity, with the change in the price of the commodity, the demand for that particular commodity does not change. It remains unaffected. So, quantity demanded does not change in response to changes in the price of that particular commodity. In other words, demand is insensitive, irresponsive or insensitive. So in this case, the value of elasticity of demand, rather price elasticity of demand, is equal to 0. And if we look at the graph below, where the demand curve is drawn with respect to the price, so we can see that whenever the price changes from P0 to P2 and again P0 to P1, however the quantity demanded remains same all throughout, and it is depicted by Q. So here we can see that the demand curve is parallel to y-axis or the price axis. In other words, the demand curve is perpendicular to the x-axis or the quantity axis. So in the case of perfectly inelastic demand, we experience such type of demand curve which is parallel to y-axis. However, such situations are usually not experienced in reality, and this is just a theoretical concept. So moving forward with the other types of or the degrees of elasticity of demand. So the second type is relatively inelastic or inelastic demand. So in this case, what happens? Percentage change in quantity demanded is less than percentage change in price. So here, with the change in the price of a particular commodity, the demand also changes. However, the proportion of change in price is more than the proportion of change in the demand. In other words, large proportionate change in the price of a commodity is followed by a smaller proportionate change in the quantity demanded. We can see changes in the price and there would be changes in the demand in response to that. However, the proportion by which the price changes would be more than the proportion by which the demand changes, because of which we get this relatively inelastic or inelastic demand. So here the value of elasticity of demand, rather price elasticity of demand, is less than 1. And if we look at the graph below, where the demand curve is plotted as DD1 and quantity demanded is plotted in the x-axis and price on the y-axis. So here we can see that the P1, P2, this length is larger than the distance or the length Q1, Q2. That means the proportion by which price is changing is more than the proportion by which quantity demanded is changing in response to that. Therefore, Q1, Q2, this distance is smaller than P1, P2. Therefore, demand curve in this case has a steep slope, and Such kind of demand curve or such kind of situation of price elasticity of demand happens in case of necessary goods like rice, wheat, salt, etc. Because in these types of goods, even if the price of the commodity changes manifold, the demand almost remains same because these goods are necessary for our survival, and because of which changes in the price of the commodity does not have much effect on the change in quantity demanded of those commodity. So now let's look at the example of relatively inelastic or inelastic demand. Suppose this is a demand schedule for commodity X. X is, say, wheat or rice. Now when the price of rice was 8 rupees, the quantity demanded was 10 kg. And when the price of rice increased to 12 rupees, then the quantity demanded of rice decreased to 8 kg. So when the price was 8 rupees, corresponding quantity demanded was 10 rupees, and when the price was 12 rupees, the corresponding quantity demanded of rice was 8 kg. Now already we know the mathematical formulation, that is how to compute or how to calculate the quantity elasticity value. So with that formula, if we move ahead, price elasticity EP in absolute value equal to change in quantity demanded divided by original quantity, that is Q1. So here what would be the change in quantity demanded? 10 minus 8, that is 2, and divided by original quantity. Original quantity was 10, and the whole thing is divided by change in price. Here the difference in price is 12 minus 8, that is 4, divided by original price, that is 8. So if we simplify the terms, we will get the value as 0.4. This is a case of relatively inelastic demand where the value of elasticity is less than 1. So moving with other types of degrees of price elasticity. So next is unitary elastic demand or unit elasticity. So as the words suggest, literal meaning of the words suggest, in this case or in this situation, what happens? The quantity demanded changes in response to changes in price, and here what happens? Percentage change in quantity demanded is equal or same as the percentage change in price, because of which it gets the name unitary elastic demand. So a given proportionate change in price results in the same proportionate change in the quantity demanded. The proportion by which price of a particular commodity changes with the same proportion, the quantity demanded of that particular commodity also changes, because of which the value of elasticity, price elasticity of demand in this case, is equal to 1. So here also, by plotting quantity demanded on the x-axis and price on the y-axis, we get a demand curve as DD, and here we can see that the length of P0 P1 is equal to the length Q0 Q1. That means the proportion by which price changes is equal to the proportion by which the relative quantity demanded of that particular commodity changes. So in this case, the demand curve is a rectangular hyperbola. So if we move with an example in the next slide. So this is the numerical example of unitary elasticity of demand. Suppose for a hypothetical commodity Y, price initially was 5 rupees and corresponding quantity demanded was 25 kg. When the price changes to 7 rupees, the quantity demanded also changed to 15 kg by following the law of demand. Now, mathematically, if we compute price elasticity in absolute value, change in quantity demanded was 25 minus 15, 10, divided by original quantity demanded, that is 25. When we divide the whole thing by change in price, that is 7 minus 5, 2, divided by original price, that is 5, will get the result as 1. This is the elasticity value, which is equal to 1, and this corresponds to unitary elasticity of demand. That means the demand for commodity Y changes in the same proportion with the changes in the price of that particular commodity, or the price of the commodity Y. So the next type of price elasticity of demand is relatively elastic demand. Also we can call it as simply elastic demand. So like the relatively inelastic demand we have discussed, there the percentage change in quantity demanded is less than percentage change in price. However, in this case, this is opposite of that situation. Here the percentage change in quantity demanded is more than corresponding percentage change in price. In this case, lesser proportionate change in price of a commodity is followed by a larger proportionate change in the quantity demanded. So the proportion by which the price of a commodity changes is less than the corresponding proportion by which the demand for that particular commodity changes. That means the responsiveness of quantity demanded of a commodity is more to that of the changes in price. Here the value of elasticity is greater than 1. And if we look at the demand curve, here the demand curve has a gradual slope. So we are plotting the demand curve by placing price on the y-axis and by plotting quantity demanded on the x-axis. Here we can see that P0 P1, this length is smaller than the length Q0 Q1, where Q0 Q1 this depicts the demand changes and P0 P1 depicts the price changes. That means the less proportionate change in the price of a commodity leads to larger proportionate change in the demand for that particular commodity. In this case, the examples for the commodities may be comfort and luxury goods like television, car, gold, furniture, etc., where a smaller change in price leads to a larger proportionate change in the demand for that particular commodity. So let's look at the numerical example for this situation of elasticity of demand. So this is the numerical example for relatively elastic demand. So this is the demand schedule for commodity Z. When the price of the commodity was 8 rupees, quantity demanded was 20 kg, and when the price changed to 10 rupees, the quantity demanded reduced by 10 units and it became 10 kg. So elasticity of demand, EP, price elasticity, when we calculate by the same formula, change in quantity demanded divided by original quantity, whole divided by change in price by original price or initial price. So in this way, if we calculate, we get the final value of elasticity as 2. That means value of elasticity is greater than 1, and As such, this is a situation of relatively elastic demand. Moving ahead, and this is the last type of degrees of elasticity, price elasticity of demand, that is perfectly elastic demand. So, like the perfectly inelastic demand, this is a situation which is opposite to perfectly inelastic demand. In that case, perfectly inelastic demand, the change in price of a commodity leaves the quantity demanded of that commodity unaffected. However, in this case, the situation is opposite. Here, a slightest change or a minutest change in the price of a commodity leads to an infinitely large change in quantity demanded. So here we can say that the demand is hypersensitive. In the previous case of perfectly inelastic demand, the demand was not sensitive. The response was very less. However, in this case, the responsiveness is quite high and demand is hypersensitive. And in this case, the demand is said to be perfectly elastic. The elasticity of demand is infinite, and therefore the value of price elasticity is infinite. And if we look at the graph again, opposite to perfectly inelastic demand, here the demand curve is a horizontal line parallel to x-axis or perpendicular to y-axis. That means at the same price in the y-axis, the quantity demanded changes from D to D1. So the demand curve is a horizontal line parallel to x-axis, and again this situation is also not experienced in reality, and this is also mostly a theoretical concept like the concept of perfectly inelastic demand. So with this, we have almost come to an end of today's session. So the things to be remembered here are different degrees of elasticities and their corresponding elasticity values, and the demand curve in all the situations, the shape of the demand curves, and also the examples. So these are the important things which we should remember from this session. And with this, I would like to finish my today's session on price elasticity of demand, and in the next session we will continue with the remaining portion of the elasticity of demand, where we will discuss the measurement of price elasticity of demand, that part. So with this, I would like to conclude my today's session on degrees of price elasticity here. For any clarification, you can post your queries in the Google Classroom, and in the next session I will continue with the measurement of price elasticity of demand. Till then, stay well. Thank you.